Father's Day portrait inspired by Tim Burton. You will need a sheet of A4 paper, a Sharpie and a black pencil, plus your lead pencil and rubber. I'm going to start with doing the frame for your portrait. Now Tim Burton, majority of his movies and cartoons and animations are a little bit spooky, a little bit wild and out there. So our frame for our portrait needs to be a little bit spooky and wild and out there. Not your normal frame. Make it something a bit different. Don't go too over the top because it is just a frame and your portrait needs to be the focus of your artwork. Making sure that when we are doing our frame, we are using a light hand with our pencil so our lines can be rubbed out, and we're adding a little bit of thickness and depth and detail. So here you can see I've done wavy lines. I have done two lots of wavy lines that follow each other, and then I've given some detail in the middle to show where there might be lumps and bumps and crevices and mounds. Going over in Sharpie to make it bold and thick and stand out, adding a little bit of extra detail as I go along. Now I'm just going over and thickening up some areas of my frame to give it a little bit extra depth. And then I'm going over and adding some shading. This is with my lead pencil at the moment. I recommend probably a black pencil if you have one. It's always helpful. This is a HB pencil, so it's a little bit trickier, so I'm actually having to do it on the side. As you can tell, like I'm using the side of the pencil because HBs are quite hard. If you have a 2B or a 4B, that would probably work a little bit easier. Smudging it in with your finger a little bit. And that gives you a bit of an idea of how the shading looks close up, because from a distance you can't really notice it as much. Now this part is about practice. So get another piece of paper and I want you to practice shading, and shading with a variety of different pencils and materials. Practicing shading from dark as you can get to light. So at the first I'm just starting with a lead pencil. This is a HB lead pencil. So if you have any 2Bs or 4Bs, practice with them as well, so you don't have to do all exactly the same pencils that I'm using or the materials I'm using. You can play around with your different levels of pencil because they're the best ones to use. But you know, we do with what we have at home, and I actually don't have those variety of pencils at home, surprisingly. So here I've got a black pencil. Now you may notice that I go over sometimes, especially for the dark part, to get it a bit darker. So to get the darker, you obviously press harder, right? And when you get lighter, your pressure on your pencil is a lot less. Now this is a charcoal pencil. This is pretty cool. I really liked using this one, but it is a bit tricky when you actually use it. These smudge really well. Charcoal pencils, but they also smudge a bit too well. So this is also an oil pastel, just showing that you can use oil pastels and even wind up crayons, I think, which I'll do next to show you. And these can be smudged too. So the harder you press an oil pastel, the darker the colour. Same with the wind up. And the slowly you release the pressure onto your pencil or crayon, and then your shading area will get lighter. Now this is really handy for what we're going to be doing with our portrait. All right, the second activity I need you to practice is having a look at the different types of faces that we need for Tim Burton's style face. So his eyes are really big. He has long, unusual noses, his mouth and his head. Notice that the heads are quite big and round with long necks. All right, once you've had a practice of those and you've worked out which ones you like, it's time to start our portrait. So remember, you can do these at any time. You don't have to do them all in one hit in one day. So we've got all week to get our Father's Day artworks complete. So if you need to stop now, or if you want to just do your sketch and finish it off later. Now the first thing I did was I chose where the top of my head wanted to be, which is not all the way to the top. You want to at least have it a quarter of the page at the top. Then I drew out a curve for his body. Of course, Tim Burtons don't have overly detailed clothing. It's a bit round and obscure, their bodies. Their bodies are usually quite thin and gangly. Their necks are very narrow. Now with the eyes, I'm just going to do really basic big round eyes. Now all his eyes are big and round, so I need all your eyes to be sort of big and round. Now where the pupil goes makes a different effect for the face, so you can choose where your pupil wants to go, if it's looking down, looking up. I'm just going to do mine straight forward, which has a bit of that stunned look. Now I'm not a massive fan of the shape of face I chose, so I'm just going to change it up a little bit. I chose sort of more of a triangle, and I'm just going to round it a bit, which sort of makes him a bit longer there, but that's okay, we'll work it out as we go. Now we need to give eyebrows, so you can play around with different types of eyebrows. You may not want to add eyebrows to your portrait of your dad. Now just remembering this is your dad that you're drawing a spooky Tim Burton portrait of, so keep in mind always things and features of your dad. So if your dad wears glasses, I would highly recommend adding glasses to your dad. If he has a facial hair, how his hair looks, what clothes he wears, make sure you take these into consideration when you're drawing your dad. Now I've just chosen a little tiny nose there, and then the mouth I've given my dad here is a little bit of a smirk. See how it lifts up to the one side? It's a little bit of a cheeky smile. And I'm adding a bit of a beard and moustache to my dad. Don't forget you need ears. Now you should have looked at slides before the video, which should have heaps of examples of Tim Burton artworks. So make sure you constantly go back to them, because they might give you ideas on it, to hairstyles, eyes that you like, mouths, all the different mouths. You can do different clothing that your dad could be wearing. There are heaps of ideas there. Now just going to add a beard in, because my dad here has a beard, and making it a bit little wild. Now remembering a lot of Tim Burton's art all is based on the shading technique after. Besides that, it's all sort of cartoony and basic lines, so there's not a heap of detail. The detail comes in with the shading that you give it to give that really spooky, cool effect. All right, just fixing up some of his moustache and facial hair, making sure. I noticed that moustache on one side wasn't kicking up as the mouth kicks up, so it sort of needs to kick up a bit. Notice I also add in some cheek marks just to give him a bit more of that drawn in, gothic sort of look. And then I've got that one cheek coming out because he's got that smirk to one side. All right, the hair. Now the hair all relates to what your dad has, okay? If your dad has a pretty standard hair, then sometimes it's fun to give that bit more of a drawn back, like a bit of a Dracula type of front hair bit. Just make it a little bit interesting, a bit more gothic, a bit more scary. And then my dad here has a bit crazy wild hair, so just giving a bit of deep crazy wild hair on the top of his head. Now I've got to think about what he's wearing. We don't want a lot of detailing what they're wearing. This is where we need to keep it a little bit simple. Tim Burton's clothing, unless it's there to acknowledge a special character that we need to know what it is, but to be dad, let's just make it what we know dad to wear. So my dad here is a basic t-shirt. Make sure the arms are in there, nice and thin. Oh, there we are. I'm rubbing out my lines. No, don't rub it away. No, we need to do this because we need to add our black Sharpie. And as you can see, I can still see my portrait underneath. That just makes it so the pencil isn't the main thing that's going to stand out. So you need to trace over all your lines now in Sharpie. Now don't colour everything in black. I've coloured the eyebrows, I've coloured his dots, pupils for his eyes. The rest of it I'm actually going to do in shading and colouring with a black pencil. So there we go. Now I can add colour. Before I do, just rub out all those pencil lines. Everything should be perfect now. All we need to do is add our colour in. Oh, forgot the detail in the ears. All right, now this is an important part, the shading around the eye. So I've just got a black pencil, nothing fancy, I'm doing a light shade. As it gets closer to the actual black Sharpie, it's a little bit darker, and I'm trying to get it to get lighter as it comes out. This is where you get that real gothic look of Tim Burton's, where their eyes seem to look like big bulbous things sticking out of their head, and their heads are quite sunken back. So just shading all the way around. You can play around with how much shading you want to get the effect that you want. You'll sort of shade a little bit and come back and fix it as you go. Now everything needs to be shaded. All the lines, I'm shading one side of each line, aware of where shadows would be. I've gone around the nose, parts of the ears. Oops, I forgot the little goatee there. I'm shading one side of the lips, everything just, and this is just a light shade, so I'm not pressing hard. Now when I'm colouring in, of course I'm pressing hard, so for the moustache and the beard, I'm going to press harder. Just adding some texture into my colour before I finish the beard off. There you go, it's all finished. Now just notice, you sort of a process that you need to just shade, stop and look. Shade another little section, stop and look, because I noticed here, you'll notice I'm adding in a little bit more shading up to the eyebrows. I felt like it just needed, the eyes weren't popping out as much as I wanted them to pop out. That little crevice between the nose and the lip, adding a bit in there, and then shading in the neck. That shading spot where your head actually leaves a shadow on your neck. Making that a little bit darker the closer it is to the beard or to the chin. And then not mapping it as a perfect line, scruffing it up a bit. Shading each side of every line that I've made. All the way even to the arms, the shadows of the sleeves on my arms. Notice the arms are nice and thin because he has thin arms. And then I wanted to add a little bit of texture, so just really simple lines into the hair and colour them in. And there you go, he's all done. Step 4 is making it spooky. You can put a spider on his shoulder or a spooky castle in the background. I'm going to put a spider web up here. Now, whatever you decide to put in the background to be a little bit spooky, I'll have a little picture on the slides of different things that you could add to your background to make your spooky Tim Burton portrait a little bit spooky and different. Or you can just do the spider web like I am here. So obviously really light lines to create that spider web effect. And then we'll get our black Sharpie and we'll go over our lines. Nice and careful with our black Sharpie, tracing over. And then adding the shading just down one side of every line with the black pencil again to give that bit of depth. Only one side of each line, and then even the curves going across for the spider webs need a bit of shading as well. Now don't remember, the whole way through this video you can stop at any time. You can pick it up whenever you want to. You don't have to have it all finished in one day. And there you go. All the shading giving a bit of that detail. Pretty cool, isn't it? That's an awesome Tim Burton. Hopefully you've enjoyed that. Now, I'm just thinking, if you think about it, in a spooky house, a lot of times those pictures have like plaques on the bottom or the top. So I was thinking we could add a plaque ourselves. So we could have, I think you're spooktacular, your spooktacular, my spooktacular dad, any of those. So I'm just going to create a little plaque for my artwork, for my frame, you know, the ones that are usually gold or bronze and they've been engraved on. So I'm going to cut this out and do it, put it on separately. Drawing my shape out, outlining it in black Sharpie, using some black pencil to shade those lines to continue the same effect, and then using that black pencil as well, make sure it's sharp. I'm going to write in it, my spooktacular dad. You might want to add something different, but the spooktacular sort of relates to our Father's Day idea and why we're doing a bit of a Tim Burton, which is a bit out there for Father's Day. There you go, our engraving is done. All I need to do now is cut it out and then choose where I'm going to put it. So I can put this at the top or at the bottom of my artwork. Once it's all cut out, play around with where you want to put it. You'll notice that some places look better than others. You might want it to hang off a bit. So you could put it down the bottom there. You can make it a bit crooked, like as if it's falling off because it's so old. Or just keep it straight as if it's not falling off. Whichever way you want to do it. And there you have it. My spooktacular dad, inspired by Tim Burton for our dads for Father's Day. I hope he loves it.